Okay guys, this is lecture number 4 on our coagulation system. Before I start with all this other things here, again, you have the notes. It says lecture 4. It's up there on Blackboard. And some of the terms you need to make sure that you know and understand. Number 1 is a platelet plug. So platelet plug is also known as a primary hemostatic plug, which means when it's coming along and first beginning, it just makes the plug. Then there's coagulation. Coagulation means the whole process of how we are going to be able to stop our bleeding. Platelet adhesion, remember last time, the platelets are always coming through my blood vessels, and when they find a spot, they want to stop and they have to adhere first. That's called adhesion. After that, then there's aggregation. So when most of the platelets are coming together, they're aggregating, calling the other platelets in to come to the big old clot party. Then we have the secondary hemostatic plug, sorry, I said that wrong. Secondary platelet plug, and that's the hemostatic plug, which now everything is now consolidated, which also can mean we also have a clot. So a clot is that whole process that's all together. Thrombus. Now, a thrombus is a clot. However, the thrombus is now loose. A clot is going to be stuck into the plug or wherever it is stopped, and it has been restricted. A thrombus means that the clot has dislodged and is now moving to another spot. And embolus is, I'm having a pulmonary embolus. The clot has moved into my system. Okay, so coagulation, the process, the property of the plasma, again, all this is in the plasma, or the process of the property of the plasma by which the soluble, remember, our goal is to get to thrombin, to go to fibrin, to get to the fibrin clottofibrinogen. So it's the process, property of the plasma, all of this is in the plasma, by which the soluble, again it's liquid, soluble fibrinogen is converted to an insoluble fibrin. And that's what we're trying to get to. Okay, so as I went through the last time, it's a cascade. I've got 3 different pathways. Extrinsic begins with factor 7, intrinsic begins with factor 12. Both of those will come together and meet it in the middle at factor 10. And so it's a coagulation process. And don't forget about my integrity of my blood vessels. We have the cardiovascular system is going to be able to close up, vasoconstrict very quickly when there's a process. My cardiovascular system, it's a closed system, and when there's a puncture, whoop, we're going to try to stop it right away. And it will begin to plug up with a semi-solid mass that's there, with that there. All right, so how is all this actually done and held together? Well, over here I've written down for you again from my notes, how does the vascular system stay fluid, right? How in the world is it going to stay fluid? And also the main thing, remember, the first thing that's going to happen, it's our endothelium and our blood vessels. So the endothelium works to keep the process going. All right, specifically, I have 6 things here that are really important on how the endothelium works to keep us from clotting. Okay, remember, number 1, it has it has nitric oxide. It has ADP diphosphatase. It has the prostacyclins, heparin sulfate, antithrombin 3, and thrombomodulin. So when we look at all these things, the first 3 are antiplatelet aggregating. And the next three are anticoagulation factors. Okay, so when we look at the endothelium, it's not going to let the platelet stick, and it's not going to let the coagulation factors come together and start the cascade. Now with the prostacyclin, I know we said that our blood vessels are going to be constricting, but you also need to know that the prostacyclins can also be vasodilators at the same time. Okay, so how does all of this work? Well, over here I have what this is just a drawing of a very bad drawing of our cells in our endothelium. And this is the basement membrane. Basement membrane is going to have collagen, tissue factor, von Willebrand's, all those things that we need to help make clots. Now remember, it's all there. And if the endothelium stays intact, otherwise it doesn't have any injury, this is not going to get exposed. Now, the factors that are here. So I have a little platelet. Ooh, I am a happy platelet, and I have receptors for ADP and von Willebrand's and all kinds of receptors. And here I go. I'm going to flow through my endothelium. Yay, an endothelium! And I'm going to come together. So what we have over here, number one was nitric oxide. NO. No, you're not going to stick. So woof, off it goes. And number two, we have our ADP diphosphatase. And woof, it's going to like bounce off. I'm not going to let you stick. And then number three, we have our prostacyclin. Again, the platelets go in, oof, it's not going to stick to the basement membrane. And again, we've got receptors for all of this, tissue factor, von Willebrand's, all of this is in there, and they're just bouncing off. This is not exposed, so the platelets are not going to stick. And so the platelets just kind of bounce off, and then the platelets get very sad. Very, very sad platelet. No, I'm so sad. I can't stick, and I can't find my party, and I only have about 8 or 10 days in order for me to stick and go to a party. All right, so that's the first three. The next three that are happening, I'm going to draw another picture here, is we have our heparin sulfate, our antithrombin 3, and our thrombomodulin that are also going to not let coagulation factors that are floating around stop and make a clot. Okay, let me see here. Yes, so platelets love basement membrane, but luckily it's all intact. And in order for the platelets to stick, they've got these receptors. And normally the receptors are inactivated. They're not going to be activated as long as there's no vascular injury there. Okay, now, so again, this is what's happening in a healthy endothelium. And the healthy endothelium does not allow your coagulation factors to activate or accumulate. So remember, the coagulation factors are circulating in our body as inactive forms, okay, otherwise known as zymogens. Once they get activated, then they act as enzymes, and boom, 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 they start the coagulation cascade. Okay, so now I'm going to erase this part here a little bit. Well, I'll just do this. And I'm going to start again with my basement membrane. Okay, you gotta have my basement membrane, collagen, von Willebrand's, all that kind of stuff. And then I've got my cells. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Ooh, I made that too big. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so these are terrible looking epithelial cells on my basement membrane. Okay, so as you remember in the first one, I had my nitric oxide and all like that, and my platelets. I'm happy. Oh no, now I'm sad because I just could not stick there. All right, so what you need to remember is that I mentioned that we have specialized mechanisms over here that I said. Can you still see it? Okay. Heparin sulfate, antithrombin 3, and thrombomodulin. So those are specialized proteins and mechanisms that inactivate the coagulation system. Well, why do I need to be inactivated if I haven't activated it? Well, this is a just in case, right? Okay, so what I'm going to do is here, I am going to put a big H right here. Okay, so my H stands for heparin sulfate. Okay, now heparin sulfate has a receptor for antithrombin 3. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take another color right here and I'm going to put it right in here. And I'm going to call that AT3 for antithrombin 3. All right, so what? Okay, so when antithrombin 3 sticks to the heparin, so when antithrombin 3 comes in and sticks to the heparin, it becomes active. Woohoo! So now my antithrombin 3 is active and it's saying, all right, I'm going to get ready to do some work. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make it active and I'm going to, woohoo, make this little thing here. And what I'm doing is I'm making a mouth. Kind of, sort of, right? Sorry. This is the active form. Okay, so this is the active form of antithrombin 3. All right, so what in the world does the active form do, and why did I put little teeth on my active antithrombin 3? Well, why I did that is because it, oops, do that on the floor. Because what it does is it cuts up the thrombin molecule. Okay, so it cuts up the thrombin molecule. So I'm going to put T right here for thrombin, and I'm also going to put my 10A, 7A. Now remember the A's meant the active form. Okay, so at the same time that it cuts up the thrombin, it's also going to inactivate your factor 10 and inactivate your factor 9, 10-9, T10-9. Okay, so that's what it's inactivating. All right, so it inactivates this. Inactivates 10A, and then it destroys 9. Oh wow, that kind of sounds like the blood bank, right? Bison destroys Duffy. Okay, so that's what your heparin sulfate is on your cells. Heparin sulfate has a receptor for antithrombin 3. If antithrombin 3 comes and attaches, it activates it. Once it's activated, it's going to chomp up thrombin. Let's just make sure we know this is thrombin. It's going to inactivate or chomp up thrombin, inactivate 10A, and destroy 9A. Okay, now, there are other receptors on here, thrombomodulin, and I'm going to put it over here, and I'm putting it in blue. Okay, thrombomodulin. Thrombomodulin. So what does that word sound like? Thrombomodulin. What does that word sound like? Can you see that? Yes. All right. So what does thrombomodulin sound like? Well, thrombomod sounds like it's modifying thrombin. So that's what it is. So thrombomodulin modulates the activity of your thrombin. All right. So what's going to happen is I'm going to get my thrombin in there. And oh, that's not a good color. We can't really see that. I use green. Okay, so this is thrombin. Okay. So thrombin attaches to the thrombomodulin. Yay! So what do I care if it attaches? Well, you care because what it's going to do is activate protein C. So I'm going to get a big C over here. Okay, that's a C. So that's protein C. So again, I have thrombomodulin on my epithelial cell, thrombomodulin. Thrombomodulin grabs the thrombin. If these two come together, they get excited, and it will now, let me turn the camera a little bit, it will now activate your protein C. Okay, so now it activates your protein C. Well, what do I care about protein C? Well, you should care about protein C because protein C digests 5A and 8A. 5A and 8A. Let me make my C bigger. That's a big C. Okay. Aha. Okay. My protein C does that. Okay. Now, so I've already mentioned my heparin sulfate, my antithrombin 3, and my thrombomodulin. One more thing that you have to remember, which I mentioned before in the other, I was going to say emails, in the other videos, is that the endothelium still wants to prevent any type of thrombin system that's there. Therefore, it produces tissue plasminogen activator, TPA, which is what I brought in last time. So, TPA. Okay. And so what do I care about TPA? Well, we care about TPA because TPA, I'm running out of a little bit of room here. Whoop, over here, plasminogen. Now remember, that I said when a clot is forming towards the end, it's going to absorb into the clot plasminogen. Okay, so your plasminogen is then going to go to plasmin in the presence of your TPA. Plasmin. And I mentioned that last time. All right, so what do I care? I care because plasmin is the one that breaks up the fibrin clots. So plasmin is going to chomp up fibrin. When it chomps up the fibrin and cuts it up, what I'm left with is fibrin degradation products. Okay. So I mentioned that in the video lecture number 3B, I think it was 3B. All right, so that when a clot is being formed, it absorbs naturally into it the plasminogen. Tissue plasminogen activator, again, it's coming from the tissues, activating plasminogen to plasmin. Plasmin breaks down fibrin to fibrin degradation products. Okay, so protein C, I already said that. Tissue plasminogen activators, I have said that. Plasmin independent, and take it the fibrin. Okay, so what we have here is how a healthy endothelium helps us not to clot. So you can imagine, once my healthy endothelium is damaged, whether it's damaged with maybe there's bacteria in it, or maybe there's cholesterol in it, or maybe I cut myself and I've got, a big break in there. Whether I cut myself in a car accident or surgery, so even surgeries can activate the coagulation system. So that's why a lot of times when people are going into surgery, they will go ahead and give them anticoagulants, okay, because they don't want them to clot during surgery. If they clot during surgery, they're gonna throw a clot. When we say quote unquote throw a clot, they're gonna get an embolus, and then they could have a stroke or something else that's horrible. So you can see that the healthy endothelium is so important. So healthy endothelium in the tissue is, number one, antithrombotic, antithrombin, thrombotic, and anticoagulant, because it stops my 10A, my 9A, my 5A, and my 8A. So again, I'm going to repeat that. Healthy tissue is, I'm going to add antiplatelet, antithrombin, and anticoagulant, specifically coagulants 10A, 9A, 5A, and 8A. All right, so that's what the healthy endothelium does, and it's really, really important for you to know that. All right, when it gets injured, whoo-hoo, that's the other thing. All right, so what did I say? Trauma, drugs, cuts, antigen antibody complexes, even a venipuncture. So when you guys are doing your venipuncture, what are you doing? You're puncturing a hole in here. And what are you exposing? Tissue factor, collagen, etc. And even that will cause the coagulation system to start. But don't worry, you're not going to cause anybody to have clots. Why? because the normal tissue down, let's just say you put the needle in here. If you put the needle in here, I've got thrombomodulin, I've got tissue plasminogen activator, I have all this that's going to stop a coagulation or something from happening. Okay, all right. All right, so if my what is this? If my vasculature, my endothelium gets damaged, no longer antiplatelet, I'm no longer antithrombin, I'm no longer anticoagulant. So, what's going to happen if I get injured? You know this already from the other lectures. If I get injured, number one, vasoconstriction, right? When we have vasoconstriction, then what happens? I've got, well, let me just kind of draw it. All right, so I'm going to erase this a little bit. All right. Ah! I got damaged. Ah! That's VW. For von Willebrand's. I got damaged. I've got tissue factor. I've got collagen. Now I've got von Willebrand's, tissue factor, and collagen that are all being released there. And it's like this sticky material. And then what's going to happen, my platelet is no longer going to be sad, but then it's going to come over here. And woohoo, I am so happy. Right? I'm going to get to have a party before I have to dive. So I've got all of these sticky materials that are coming up. Platelets have receptors for tissue factor, collagen, von Willebrand's, and they're going to stick and they're going to hook on these platelets. All right, and don't forget, the platelets have receptors for your glycophorin. And so we have my glycophorin 1B, etc. Okay. All right, so what's going to happen is once I get damaged, platelets are going to come in. Vasoconstriction, secretion of stuff, von Willebrand's, tissue factor, collagen, your glycophorins. Platelets get happy, they come in, they stick to it, and then the first stage again, remember what happens? Adherence. Number one, adherence. Once they adhere, then they get activated. What happens during platelet activation? The platelets get excited and they release the contents of their alpha granules and dense granules, which helps them stick and also helps call in the other platelets. All right, then we've got adhesion, activation, aggregation, consolidation, and then we've got our nice little clot. Okay, so I think you guys got that. I have a better picture on the drawing that you have on my thing. Well, I'll just draw it here. All right, so let's clean this up a little bit. Okay, so I've got my all right, so this is where I got hurt, right? I got hurt. So what's happening here? I have my von Willebrand's here. My platelets are coming in. They're so happy. They have a hook on here for your von Willebrand's. And I've got more platelets coming in, and I'm so happy. The platelets are secreting your contents like ADP, serotonin, let's just say granule release. And they are so happy. Oh, don't forget my GP1B. So I've got my receptors here. So I've got all these receptors that are coming in, and they're going to get stuck right there. So once the endothelium is injured and I get the break, that is what's going to start everything off. Okay. Okay. So my injured cells are going to be releasing your von Willebrand's factor. They're going to come in. The platelets are going to stick to the collagen. Let me put collagen over here. They're going to stick to the collagen there. And the platelets are going to hook on. They hook on there by my GP1A. And so I've got these little hooks. This is GP1A. They hook on there. And now they can begin to adhere. Okay, they are getting so excited. They are releasing the contents of the granules and they're activated. And the platelets stick together. The platelet membrane phospholipases are activated. The phospholipases break down the phospholipid to arachidonic acid. We're going to get to that in a minute. So what happens right here is, number one, your platelets, platelet membrane, your platelet membrane phospholipids are activated. Well, what do I care? Well, once they become activated, they're going to break down to arachidonic acid. Let me see how you spell it. Arachidonic acid. Well, what do I care? Phospholipids are activated. The phospholipids break down to arachidonic acid. Well, what do I care? I care because arachidonic acid goes to my thromboxane. A2, we're going to abbreviate that, TXA2. Thromboxane A2, TXA2. Well, what do I care? Well, I care because thromboxane A2 is a vasoconstrictor. So remember, I have this hole. What's going to happen? I need vasoconstriction. All right, my platelets are activated. The phosphates are there. It's breaking down. It makes thromboxane A2, helps with my vasoconstrictor, and it also helps with platelet aggregation. So it's a platelet aggregator. Okay. All right, so platelets are here. We had a problem coming in. I've got a break. Platelets come in. They hook on via GP1A to the von Willebrands and the collagen. Phospholipids start becoming activated. The phospholipids are going to be broken down to arachidonic acid. What do I care? Arachidonic acid gets broken down to thromboxane A2. What do I care? Thromboxane A2 is a vasoconstrictor and it's a platelet aggregator. So the thromboxane A2 is going to go back and bring the platelets together. Isn't that just totally amazing? You wouldn't think just those tiny little purple things that you're seeing in your differential are making such a big difference. Oh my gosh, it's just amazing. Okay, let's see. All right, so a question I had for you was, what determines what happens in the vascular system? How is all this balanced out? Well, I'm going to have a balance between my thromboxane A2 and my GP2. All right, so my platelets don't like this, but my GP2 are coming from my endothelial cells. Okay, remember, over here. I don't like that. All right, let's see. Let's release the granules. Aspirin. Okay, now, in order for me to get to my arachidonic acid to my thromboxane A2, I need to have an enzyme called cyclooxygenase. Cyclooxygenase. And again, that's an enzyme. I need my cyclooxygenase to get to there. When we take aspirin, aspirin works here on your cyclooxygenase. So if there is no cyclooxygenase or it's inhibited, then I cannot make my thromboxane A2. If I cannot make thromboxane A2, my platelets are not going to aggregate. So remember they say, well, take a baby aspirin so that you won't make blood clots. Well, how does the baby aspirin work? The baby aspirin works on inhibiting your arachidonic acid going to thromboxane A2 via the inhibition of your cyclooxygenase. So cyclooxygenase is where the aspirin works. And that's why the platelets won't stick, because I don't have thromboxane, so I can't aggregate. Oh, look at that. I was writing down there and I don't even know if you can see that. Oh, silly me, silly me. Let's see. Let's go. See if I can move this down a little bit. Oh. All right. So I'm holding it down with my hand, but you can see that. All right. So my platelet membrane phospholipids are activated. These activated phospholipids get broken down to arachidonic acid, arachidonic acid. Arachidonic acid is going to get broken down to thromboxane A2. But in order for that to happen, it has to have cyclooxygenase. Okay, thromboxane A2 is a vasoconstrictor and a platelet aggregator. So if I interfere with arachidonic acid going to thromboxane A2 by taking aspirin, then my platelets can't aggregate and they can't get sticky. So that's how that works. Okay. Let's see. Now, I'm going to kind of erase this a bit again. And I'm going to start over a little bit. And I'm going to make my membrane, and I'm going to have a break in my membrane, like if I got stuck with a needle or got cut in a car accident or whatever. Von Willebrand's. I'm going to get my platelets over here. And oh my goodness, I was trying to see if I can see it. Let me see. Can you see that? Yes, you can. Okay. And then okay, so what's happening here? we have vasoconstriction that's coming in, and we have serotonin that's around. Okay, we have some serotonin. All right. All right. Remember that the platelets are being releasing all this stuff, so we've got ADP there also, right? Serotonin, ADP. We have our von Willebrand's factor, and remember they get hooked by the GP1A there. All right. Now, remember that we need calcium. So what's going to happen is that I have to have calcium. I have to have calcium in order for all this to work together. All right, so calcium, I need calcium to hold my coagulation factors to the platelet phospholipid membrane. So remember in the previous lectures, we had a platelet and we had receptors and all like that. And we said, ooh, I love this factor. All right, so all of the Coag factors are happening on the platelet surface. So these are Coag factors. Coag factors here. So I'm having coagulation factors coming in here and working on top of the platelet phospholipids. I have to have calcium in order for these coagulation factors to stick and stay to the platelet membrane. All right, so what's going to happen, I have my initial platelets coming in. Woohoo, I'm so happy, I'm a party, and I'm calling my friends. So I've called my friends over here. So now I've got a layer, and I've got another layer, and I'm going to build another layer. Do you see that? Okay. So I'm going to build a layer and a layer and a layer. And every time I've got a layer, I've got my coagulation factors coming in, and I've got my calcium that I have to have in order for my coagulation factors to stay there. Let's see. Okay, my coagulation factors are have a negative charge. So the Coag factors have a negative charge. And what's calcium? Positive charge. So when you have a positive and negative, then they come together and they're attracted to each other. So that's what gets them to be able to stick together. The negative charge on the coagulation factors is coming from glutamic acid residues. Vitamin K is needed to have vitamin K dependent factors. Okay, yes, you do have to know which your vitamin K dependent factors are. I will just write them down for you. Vitamin K dependent factors are your 2, 7, 9, and 10. Okay. 2, 7, 9, and 10. All right, so when we have anticoagulants such as Coumadin, warfarin, etc., they inhibit the vitamin K factors. They take it out. So if I accidentally overdose on those anticoagulants and I have to make myself be able to coagulate again, it's very simple. All I got to do is take vitamin K. Well, where does vitamin K come from? Leafy green vegetables. Well, not even, I mean, even broccoli's got that, right? It's got vitamin K. So again, that's why these new anticoagulants are saying, no need to change your diet. No need for all these other tests and things. But you need to remember that these new types of anticoagulants are not reversible. Coumadin, warfarin, etc. are reversible because all I have to do is give them some vitamin K. So yes, you do have to know vitamin K coagulation factors, 2, 7, 9, 10. Okay, 2, 7, 9, 10. All right. All right, so I've got my platelets coming in. I've got my coagulation factors coming in. And as my more platelets arrive to get deeper and deeper and deeper levels, my thromboxane A2, my ADP activate the platelets, and then they make a second layer and another layer and another layer. So over here, I need another color. This is I need to have my thromboxane A2 coming in here also. Okay. All right. Wow. This is pretty, I told you, this is like really pretty amazing. I can't believe how amazing platelets are. They're just so fantastic. All right. So to recap everything that I've kind of gone over already, number one, we've got an injured endothelial cell that's exposing my endothelium here, exposes my von Willebrand's factor, and then I forgot my collagen. I've got my collagen there, so I've got my von Willebrand's factor and I've got my collagen. I get my first layer of platelets. They stick here with the von Willebrands. They release their contents of their granules and they call everybody else in. They start activating themselves. The second layer comes in. They stick together. Now, the other thing that helps them stick together, and when they're activated, is that they begin to have a shape change. So they start getting these arms and they start doing all these weird things like that so that they can help stick together. So they're stretching out and coming in. So you might want to have a platelet. So this little platelet is coming in here like this, and they're just doing all that thing. So the platelets have shape changes. Okay. So the activation helps them do the shape changes. All right, so then we've got this platelet plug that's there. And remember, in the beginning, this is going to be a loose plug, so that's what it's called, the primary plug there. And the coagulation factors start coming in. What was the goal of coagulation factors? The goal of coagulation factors is to get from thrombin to fibrinogen to fibrin. And remember, the end product is fibrin. When the clot is getting together with the fibrin at the same time, it's incorporating plasminogen. Plasminogen gets activated by tissue plasminogen activator, and it's broken down to plasmin. Plasmin starts dissolving the clot when it's ready. And then I get my fibrin degradation products. All right, so platelet adhesion is going to be this beginning first layer. The activation, remember, activation is when they start releasing the contents of their granules. And then we have aggregation when they start sticking together. Okay. Okay, so remember, how many pathways do we have? We have an intrinsic pathway and we have an extrinsic pathway. Both pathways come into the common, which is by number 10, the common pathway number 10, and then that leads to the fibrin product. Let's see here, I have this whole big picture here that I've drawn out for you. And I've already done that, activated. So remember, oh yeah, so remember though, even though we have two pathways, both pathways are activated at the same time, except one is very quick. Which one? Extrinsic pathway. The intrinsic pathway is a little bit slower, but the common thing that they're going to go to is factor number 10 to go to fibrin. All right, extrinsic. Okay. All right, so thrombus, clot inside circulation, clot outside the circulation. All right, so that is really it for this lecture. I'm hoping that you got it all. So what I'm going to do is a recap again. I have this and I gave you my notes so that you're able to follow through with this. So remember, even though we are telling you about the pathways and we go here and there, where is the pathway occurring? It's occurring on the platelet phospholipid layer. You need to remember that. It's occurring on the platelet phospholipid layer. Let me see here. Okay. What do I have here? 7. Okay. All right, well, that was it for this lecture number 4. Let me know if you've got any questions. This is it's really fascinating. It's really amazing. So just let me know. All right, so bye for now.